All right. Hello, everybody. We are today with Joshua Danker Dake, and I'm very excited to bring him to you. He is another writer with the Tulsa Nightwriters group. He has been the president of the group for about 3 years.
Yes.
You were? Okay. So very exciting. We were just talking. I did not realize there were about 100 members. He said that's a wild number. I think that's incredible. So probably something you guys might want to, check out perhaps at some point in time. Hint, hint, wink, wink. It's a really good idea. Some of them are forming relationships with each other in the class, Joshua, and I think that that's a super good thing. Because I tell them you've got to have somebody that you can talk about writing with. You have to have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. And they just did an assignment where they had to create a focus group and share their novel idea with a focus group and then get some ideas. And I think some of them found that to be very helpful and insightful. People have kind of whacked out ideas. One girl's mom was telling her she needed to write it like a sex scene. And I'm like, your mother? Okay. That was super funny. But I mean, hey, whatever works. So I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, pretty wild. I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to show you all Joshua's author page, his website, and also his author page on Amazon. So you can find where you can look him up and find some information about him. I have to wait for the little Zoom screen to disappear there. But here is his website, and I put it immediately onto the About page. So you could see there's a little bio here, but I also wanted to note the awards. I thought those were fairly cool. So we've got Sci-Fi Fantasy Novel Award. That's pretty exciting. And then the OWFI, that's the Oklahoma Writers. Is that right?
Oklahoma Writers Federation.
Okay, that's very cool. Awesome stuff. So we're going to ask him questions about those in a little bit, but very exciting to have been receiving awards. And then if we click on novels here, I'm curious about this. How do you solve a murder committed with a weapon that doesn't exist? Is that like an ice pick or ice?
Okay, so this is my science fiction novel. It's a sci-fi buddy cop action thriller. And if you're familiar with Star Trek, you're familiar with the holographic technology that they use on Star Trek.
Yes.
So how would you solve a mystery if somebody were killed with a hologram, not on a spaceship full of nice people like on Star Trek, but in a city full of normal, horrible people?
Right. Normal, horrible people. That's fantastic. I like that idea. So this is already written?
Yeah, this book is out now. It's fun. I write books with the goal of making people finish the book and say, that was fun.
Good.
So that's this one. And then the sequel is coming out this summer. And then hopefully it will be a long ongoing series of self-contained stories.
Now, where did you get the idea for the hologram and the murder? Where did that idea come from?
You know what? I don't have a good answer for that. A lot of the ideas just sort of pop into my head in the form of, what if this happened? What if that happened? And then the work is thinking about how do I build a story out of this concept that I just randomly had while I was in the gym or in the shower, or whatever.
Right. I was in a grocery store line when one of my storylines came to me. I mean, it's just so random. And then you kind of have to pay attention to those things.
It is. I have to have a notepad and pen all the time. All the time.
I think I've said that in class. Have something to write on just about anywhere that you are, or a good app on your phone where you can keep your notes and be able to put that stuff down quick so you don't lose it. So here is the author page that he has on Amazon. This is also exciting. I wanted to ask you about A River of Stories. That was a short story collection for the writers group, right?
Yeah, the Tulsa Nightwriters every couple of years puts together an anthology like this of short stories. Sometimes it's themed, sometimes it's not themed, but it's an opportunity for people to showcase their work.
Okay, very good. Now, were you all aware that you could be submitting to the Tulsa Review, which is TCC's
I'm vaguely familiar with Tulsa.
literary journal?
Mhm.
I didn't know if that was something that had been talked about as well, but that's a possibility as well if you want to.
Yeah, there are many contests and publications and anthologies, more than most people know about. And so one of the things we've always done in the Tulsa Nightwriters is try to help people be aware of the opportunities that are out there.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That's very cool. I want to know more about that myself. So, okay, what is the Spare Room and Other Stories?
The Spare Room and Other Stories, that book is now out of print, but that was a collection of short stories. Kind of feels like my demo tape in a way that there's some good stuff there. There's some stuff there that, you get to the point as a writer where you're like, I'm not as excited about this as I was, which is good because it means you have matured as a writer. But if you can find that one, it's probably, hopefully someday it will be a collector's item.
Is it one of those that now I know I have a couple on there under my previous name where if you go on there, the copies are like $500.
I don't know. I don't know how the Amazon's algorithms work
Let's
in
look at this.
mysterious ways.
Okay, no, it doesn't have a price on there, but every now and then I'll go and I'll look at mine, and it just makes me giggle how much they have it on there for sale. Like, that is not even a thing. It's super funny. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share and put us back over here. But when I post this video to Blackboard for you all, I will also give you the links specifically to his website, to Joshua's website, and to his author page on Amazon. So you can quickly go there and get more information or click and get one of his books. I just got Jim Laughter's book, The Apostle Murders. And I'm very excited. I can't wait to dig into that. So that's going to be a good time. But so thank you for joining me today. I'm super excited about this and
thanks for having me.
Find out what you have to offer, not only to the students, but to myself as well. For you guys to know before he starts talking, Joshua is not only an author, but he is an editor by trade as well. So
Yes.
Definitely someone that we all, myself included, need to listen to. And so he's got some ideas of things he wants to talk about today, and I'm super excited. So have at it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about your writing process first. And then, like you said, that goes hand in hand with the editing. So if there's a smooth transition in there at some point, then that's great.
Okay. So I am an editor. I've been an editor not quite as long as I've been a writer, but it's been a long time. And when I first started writing fiction, I think like most people do, you just sit down and you start making stuff up and pantsing it all the way through and see where it goes. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're starting out. But I found that for me, especially when I was trying to write more plot heavy fiction, that it could get a little meandery, and it could be hard to figure out where you want to go. And I know you've heard of, if not experienced, people say, I wrote this whole manuscript and I threw it all in the trash because it wasn't working. I absolutely refuse to do that. I will never let that happen to me. And so I have developed a process where that doesn't have to happen. So I have become, in my old age, a meticulous outliner.
In your old age?
What's that?
Did you say in your old age?
In my old age, yeah.
Okay.
I have 3 kids. Okay, it's once that third one hit, I got measurably older. So the form that my writing takes now is I usually go through 3 or 4. They're not drafts, but I'm going to call them drafts. 3 or 4 stages. So the first stage is figuring out what the story is going to be about. That's who are my characters?
Right.
What are the character notes I want to hit? Where do I want to take these characters over the course of the book? Completely unrelated to the plot. What do I want the story to be? What loosely do I want the 3 acts to be? And so I'll just start writing that down. That's sort of a brainstorming phase. If you see me writing that stage, that may look like me pacing around my house, looking frustrated, not with a pen and paper or anything. And that's writing because you're thinking about it. And then writing, you probably end up with 6 to 10 pages of notes. And that a lot of times takes the form of, like I said before, just the writing, what about this? What about that? What if this happens? Can this work? And so then it kind of do that until I get a sense of the overall shape of the story. And then I will make a second outline, shorter outline, that's basically what do I want to hit in each chapter. So character beats, plot beats, what do we want to cover, so that I'm not wasting space, so that I tend to write very short and lean anyway, so I make sure I have enough material for a whole book. That's not a problem a lot of people have, but I always write and I think this is not enough words for how much I just said, but that's step 2. Step 3 is really where most of the writing happens, and it really is my first draft of the book. And what I will do, because as an editor and kind of a slow writing perfectionist type of person, I always want to have that first sentence, each sentence just be perfect. You want to get it perfect. And there's a time and a place to get it perfect, but if you're trying to create and get it perfect at the same time, that's very slow and frustrating. So what I do is, it almost looks like a screenplay had a baby with a stage play, and it'll be 50 or 60 pages of just, what are the characters doing? What are they saying? I'm not worried about how any of it comes across. I'm not even worried about capitalization, spelling, anything like that. It's just what is happening in the story. Right. And so then I crank that out, and it's, if it's 50, 60 pages, that's a lot. And then that is what I actually write my first proper looking draft of the book off of that. And so then I don't have to, I can think about crafting my sentences, and I don't have to think about, well, what's happening in the story, because I've already figured that out.
Right.
And so then by the time I get to that point, that's probably, that quote first draft is probably 90 to 95% what the final version is going to look like, because it's been through so many steps, and each step is progressively more detailed. So if something isn't working, I can figure that out very early and stop and go back and fix it. And I haven't spent 9 months of my life crafting something that's not good enough. So that's basically my process.
Okay. So part of it is, I just want to reiterate it. I was taking notes as you were walking. So the first step, you said that's your brainstorming time. And that generally ends up being like 6 to 10 pages where you're talking yourself through the characters. And some of that's not even happening on paper.
Right.
So the writing process, which can involve your brainstorming session, which comes to each of us differently, however we need to do it. For me, I like to just take paper and just write tons of notes, tons and tons of notes. So that's what I have for number 1. And you said you kind of flesh out your 3 acts in that stage as well. So, and then 2, you said at this point, you kind of plot out your chapters and kind of get an idea of what the plot's going to be, especially for each chapter.
Yes.
Okay. And then 3rd is a first draft, but not a draft. So it's 50 to 60 pages generally, where you're just kind of fleshing out the story.
Yes.
And then you sit down to actually begin the first draft. And when that is complete, you have about 90% of what will be the final product.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Very good.
And I developed that. I don't know that's not going to work for everybody, but it works for people who like to outline. And I've written 4 novels that are horribly broken and will never see the light of day through great pain to myself. So I encourage, everybody, don't just necessarily adopt somebody's method, but if it sounds appealing, try it. And if you need to make changes to make it work for you, then by all means, because that's what's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have, I gave them a variety of textbooks for the course just because I wanted them to be able to hear from different authors the way we do things differently. We have Stephen King on writing.
Mhm.
Of course, Stephen King's more just sit down and do it. Just
Yeah.
build your characters and let them tell the story. And he doesn't ever know exactly how it's going to end when he starts.
And that there's something to that, but you can also make the case that about half of Stephen King's books have horrible, lame, weak sauce endings because of that. So I mean, I can say.
Are you one who would say that about the Dark Tower series?
Oh, the Dark Tower series went off the rails well before the end, I think. But I like Stephen King. He's written some fantastic stuff, and I think he can handle somebody like me throwing a few pebbles at him. But
absolutely,
his endings are not always the most satisfying.
I understand that. My Comp 1 class is completely centered around the writing of Stephen King. We use the Night Shift collection and we analyze the different short stories. It's super fun. But I use a textbook called Structuring Your Novel by K.M. Weiland. And so she's very outline oriented. And so I wanted them to see from both writers different aspects and find whatever it is that's going to work for them is what, like you said, we all have to figure out, take pieces of what this author does and pieces of what that author does. But if we're not communicating with other authors and we're not listening to other authors and finding out what they do, then we're just kind of floundering around and flopping around, not really having direction for ourselves. And so it's good to find out what other people do.
It's very helpful to be able to learn from other people, so that to save yourself the trouble and the pain of having to figure it out all by yourself.
Absolutely. I can't imagine having done it completely on my own. I mean, I went through an MFA, so I had a long stage of learning different aspects of all of these different characteristics of writing. And I actually had some students ask me the other day, what my methods were for critiquing. And it's not so much that it's a method for critiquing in this class specifically as it is me just really gearing everything toward a very peer review centered environment. I'm trying to help them and encourage them to begin to be critiquing each other. Because when we're critiquing each other, then we see more inside of our own writing that could be addressed or fixed or edited or enhanced or just get new ideas more when we're doing it for each other than just relying on the teacher. So that's that peer review thing, that writer group thing. It's so important. So we do need to be talking to other writers and getting ideas. So thank you for that. That was a jumping point there for me. I kind of went off the rail a little bit, but I saw the connection in my head, so I went with it. But so let's talk about editing, since that's your thing. And well, writing is your thing too, but you are an editor.
I am an editor.
So what does that mean specifically? What is it that you specifically are editing? How about that first?
So I don't have a formal academic background in writing or editing. I just kind of fell into those things while I was getting my other degrees. I work right now as an academic editor. So I work for a company based out of Hong Kong, and we edit papers for professors there who want to publish their research in English-speaking journals, but for most of them, English is their second language.
Oh.
And so I edit papers there, and I also kind of supervise and check the editing of our other editors.
Wow. So you're editing the editors?
Sometimes, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sounds interesting.
It is interesting. I've been exposed to a wide variety of fields and research that I had never even thought about before.
Mhm.
So it's interesting.
Is it that translation aspect, since English isn't a lot of their first language, has that caused you to have to become more familiar with the structure of other languages?
It's not the structure of the other languages so much as it's different languages lead to different usage errors and grammatical error patterns that you notice in English once they write in English. So there is an adjustment, but once you understand how a certain group of native speakers is writing in English, then it's much easier to see the common mistakes.
Mhm. I understand that because I have students who have Spanish as their first language. And so I had 3 years of conversational Spanish. And so I have an idea of how that language works and how to help them make the transition to English and how to help correct them with their papers in class. But I have a student right now who speaks 35 African dialects.
Hmm.
And I am so lost as to know how to help him specifically, because I am not familiar with the dialect at all, to help him understand how it would be better worded in English. I'm still struggling there. I'm working in that,
Mhm.
that area. But it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. 35 dialects.
That's a lot.
I was like, I don't know how you have that much in your head. How do you do that?
I just do English.
And I struggle with that. So, but that's all right. Okay, so very good. So that's what you do for a living.
Yes.
So detail oriented.
Yes.
Very detail oriented, which is a good thing. And so because of that, you probably do tend to struggle when you sit down to just start writing, because that tendency to want to edit yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that that is a struggle for you?
It is, and I'm always looking for ways to write faster.
Mhm.
And so my method that I described is that's my attempt to write faster. It's still frustratingly slow, and I can't write at the speed I would like to write, but
Mhm.
it does kind of save all that editing obsession for one smaller window so that it's not holding me back the rest of the time.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, talk to us about editing as far as it goes with fiction. Like, what are some
Fiction.
things that we all need to know?
Okay. So editing happens on a lot of levels. Okay. So on your very surface level, you have your copy editing, which is your subject verb agreement, and your punctuation is right, and your spelling is right, and just the very basics. And those are things that people really should be learning to do for themselves.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
But beyond that, on the next level, you have, how is this sentence flowing? Would it read better a different way? Is it wordy? Is it long? Is it confusing? Is it vague?
Mhm.
And you have paragraph level editing. Then you have editing all the way up to, does the plot work? Is this character believable?
Mhm.
And so editing can be as deep. It goes all the way down, to the very roots of your story.
Right. I'm taking notes. All right. So you would say that it's multi-level.
It's multi-level, and I think most writers do a little bit of it at least, even if a lot of writers will say, I'm not an editor, I don't edit at all, I don't know the punctuation rules. You should learn the punctuation rules. I'm not a prescriptivist, I'm not super dogmatic, but if you're gonna write and take it seriously, then at least do that much.
Mhm. Yeah. Understand the rules of your genre of
Yeah.
art. And we have to understand them well in order to be able to break them in ways that works.
Yes.
Mhm. If you want to be able to break them, you need to know them so that you can have evidences for why that was necessary, I would say. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So let's talk more about, like you said, paragraph level. So what do you mean by paragraph level? Because I like this idea of breaking it down. And in my comp classes, and I hadn't thought to include this in the novel writing class, but in my comp classes, I tell them that when I'm editing something short, I will go through it multiple times. You know, one time I go through, I'm looking for a specific problem. And then the next time I go through, I'm looking for another specific problem. And then, you know, just in those different layers, as you said, but I like how you broke that down, where sentences and then paragraph. So if you would expand a little bit on paragraph level.
Okay, so I work in a broad range of fiction genres, but my focus interest-wise is sci-fi and fantasy. And one of the things I noticed with new writers, especially with these genre fiction writers, is I noticed two main things. One is a bunch of dialogue and conversations that go nowhere because the author thought it was cute or it sounded clever.
Right.
And the other is exposition, just excessive exposition, especially on the front end. When you're writing fiction, unless, well, no, I'm not even going to qualify it. No exceptions. If you're writing good fiction, everything you put on the page should either advance the story, develop your characters, or preferably both at the same time. If there's sentences and paragraphs in your story that aren't doing that, they probably shouldn't be there.
Right. Right.
That's the main thing. Is the reader is smarter than I think a lot of us give them credit for, and can fill in the gaps and piece out what's going on, and doesn't need to be spoon-fed everything about everything, and also doesn't want to read your clever chit-chatty dialogue, because I promise it's not as cute as you think it is.
Right.
So that's the main thing I think with fiction, with the paragraph and the sentence level editing, is you want to keep things moving. You don't want it to get bogged down. And so you want to trim it down to be as lean as it can possibly be.
Right. And it needs, like you said, it needs to serve the story. If it doesn't serve the story, it needs to be removed. And I remember at one point I was told, if you're aiming for an 80,000 word book, you need to write 100 to 110,000 words so that you can narrow it down and remove those things that aren't serving the story. And just because you think it's cute,
most new writers tend to write long to extremely long. I write short, which is very unusual, and I've just kind of accepted it. But
what do you mean by short? You mean the length of the books?
I mean the length of the book is, I'm easily bored by books, by TV, by, you know, there's so much. You know, I've seen literally thousands of movies and read hundreds of books in my life, and I'm easily bored because I've seen most of what is out there. So if I'm getting bored by my own story, then the reader is going to get bored for sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
I need the characters to be doing interesting things. I need interesting things to be happening on the page that are meaningful for the characters.
Yes. We just had an assignment a few weeks ago where they had to take a situation with their characters and throw in like an unexpected weather occurrence. And write out, how would those characters that you already know, how would they react to the unexpected tornado that just whipped up on the plane, you know, just as an exercise to expand yourself. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was very fun.
Good.
But yeah, to be in the service of the story, in the service of what's interesting, to keep the reader from being bored. And I think sometimes we fall in love so much with our own words that we think it's interesting, when in truth, someone else is going to say, oh,
yeah,
that really did not hold my attention. And so then in those moments,
it's valuable to have readers you trust to tell you the truth.
Yes.
I have a couple of people who read my work that tell me the truth. I have one person who reads my work and just loves everything about it, and this is so great, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. And that person is wonderful to talk to, but I don't, that person's insights into my book are not always the most helpful, because you're too positive on this. Whereas you also don't want somebody that's going to nitpick and tear it down. Not everyone is an expert. Not everyone is qualified to give you structure advice and character advice. But if there's somebody you trust who reads in the genre and they say, you know, this was boring, then you should probably listen to that.
You should probably pay attention. We don't want to be boring. No, we really
life is too short to finish boring books, honestly. And that is the number one sin an entertainer, including a writer, can make, is to be boring.
I'm writing that down. Can I quote you?
Yeah, I think I'm paraphrasing somebody else, but I can't remember who it was.
Well, I can look and see, but that's awesome. Life is too short to finish boring books. I generally don't either. If I'm reading something and my mind's wandering, that's enough of that. That's enough of that. I've got something else I can do.
I'm sure, you know, most of us have a book list of books that, you know, I'm never going to read all the books on my book list. So
I have about 20 books right now on my shelf that I picked up going, oh, I want to read that. And
that's another thing I've kind of at least tried to harness with my writing is, hey, if you don't like it, at least it was short, you know?
At least it was short. We're talking like Great Gatsby short.
My novel Projections, which we talked about earlier, that's about 70,000 words. So no matter how long I try to do a story, that seems to be about how long it comes out.
Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's over 50.
Yeah.
Because then it would just be a short story.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? I love it when I tell students that anything up to 50,000 is a short story, and they just go, really? That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
Still considered a short story. It's a little trippy. I usually try to hit, most of my manuscripts are somewhere, like I said, the 80,000 to 90,000 is usually where I end up.
And it depends what you're doing and how much story you have in those 70, 80,000 words too. It's not like there's an arbitrary word length that you must hit, you know.
No, tell your story and tell it well.
Yeah.
That's really the idea, is you want to make sure that your story is told. So, and I may have talked about this in one of the other videos, I don't know, but if I did, I sort of apologize, students, you're hearing it again. But on Amazon a few years ago, you know, every now and then you get on Amazon and you check your reviews, you know, you just want to see. And I had gotten a 1-star review. I had, you know, a lot of other 4s and 5s. And then I check it one day and there was a 1-star review, and in capital letters, it said, I would never recommend this book to anyone. And I was like, what? Why? I wanted to know why. And so I did a little sleuthing and discovered who had written it and emailed the person and said, hi, this is the author. Can I ask you a couple of questions? And fortunately for me, she responded, and we were able to strike up a back and forth conversation. And it was fascinating. This woman lives in Virginia. Like, you know, we'll never probably ever meet. But we were able to strike up a relationship, and she let me know that she had actually loved the book, but the last chapter had upset her so much because she said, I tied it up in too nice of a ribbon. And she said, I'll never forget this. She said, the character didn't deserve that. And I went, oh, that's interesting. And so I thought about it, you know, and I thought about it, and I realized she's right. And so because of that, I was able to rethink, you know, get with my publisher, my editor, and be like, let's change the book, and they unfortunately went out of business, but I have written a sequel, and the sequel wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have even existed had I not had someone willing to be honest with me and willing to put themselves out there and to give me a critique that I listened to. That's a big part of that, not taking it personally when you're edited. Yeah.
Well, that's a secret in life in general, is just to not take things personally ever, if you can help it.
It really truly is. And I never asked her to take down the review, but she did. She took down the review at some point.
But you know what, though, a 1-star review for a book you liked but just didn't like the ending, that's harsh. And if she didn't say why she didn't like it in the review, then that's just
not in the review. No, I literally, in capital letters, I would not recommend this book to anyone. And I was like, why? There was no why, so I had to find out why. That's not crazy, right?
Well, I don't know if I would go hunting down reviewers, but you got a good outcome, so that's good.
She was correct. It was interesting because most of the other reviews were all, oh, it was great, I loved it, it was so good. Like, kind of like you were saying, you have a reader who'll tell you everything all positive. And then I like it when someone can sandwich and can say, this works, this needs some attention, and can give you a good dose of insight into what you're doing.
I'll say this. You can have 20 people say something great about your book. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. And one person will come and say, your book sucked. And you will carry that around with you in your heart for days on end. That's just natural. That's human nature.
Right.
And I think it's helpful to, if you can step back and look at it kind of objectively, you think, do they have a point? Is their point valid? If not, throw it away. And then why should this bother me?
That's right.
And if it's true, then, oh, well, why should this bother me? It's true. It's something I need to go work on. So either way,
exactly,
you're managing it appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I have a few students right now who are trying to get over that hump of being able to start learning to accept criticism or critique without it hurting their sensitivities. I'll put it that way.
And that's very hard, especially, as a writer. And it never, I don't know about never, but it hasn't gotten easier for me. And I've been doing this for 20 years. It's,
and you somebody do it for a living too.
Somebody is buying a year of your life for $15-20, and then just 1 star, it was terrible.
Oh my goodness, I've never thought about it that way. They're buying a year of your life for $15.
Sorry.
Wow. Wow, you're right. We put all of that work into it. We pour ourselves onto these pages.
And I tell people, I don't wish writing on anyone. Like, if you can go through your life and not be a writer, you have a happier life. But I don't know how to not be a writer. Like, it just burns inside of me, like I should be writing. Like, I feel like that every day I should be writing. Mm-hmm. It right. Doesn't have an off switch.
Right. It's a part of you. It's how you express yourself. It's how I put words and ideas together. I am so much better on the paper than I am spoken. It's amazing to me how I can connect ideas when I'm writing in ways that I can't when I'm speaking. It's really interesting. But yeah, I get that burning. I've got to write this. I have to put this on paper. I've got to get it out. And yeah, I think sometimes people like the idea of writing, but don't have that driving desire.
It's hard work, and you have to be willing to put in that hard work.
Mm-hmm. It is hard work. And
especially if you're doing novel length.
Yes. Fiction. Well, I have told the students, and I don't know that they really hear me sometimes, but the actual writing isn't so much the work as the crafting that comes after.
Yes.
And
or the crafting that comes at the beginning.
Right.
Like, for me, the brainstorming, the coming up with the idea, the bones of it.
Yes.
That's the hard part.
Yes.
That's the hard part. Putting the muscle and the skin on the skeleton once you've got it, that's just work. That's work I can do.
Mhm.
But the hard part is coming up with it at the beginning. And then of course, if you're still developing in your craft, and getting it at a good polished level at the end is also, it's just hard all the way through. It's hard all the way through.
But we like it, everybody. We like it. It is hard all the way through, but we do it because it fulfills something in us.
Yes. And my favorite part of the process, and I think the most satisfying, is when I finished that first real draft and I go back and I read it. Like I'm just reading it now. And I think this is actually pretty good. I'm interested in this. And because usually, and by the time you finish a story, you're just sick of everything about it. You don't want to look at it.
Right. I
But
reread
to go
one
back
of
and
my
see,
books.
this is a good story and I'm proud of this. That
An
goes a
incredible
long
feeling.
way.
Yeah, I reread one of my books this past summer and cried. Like I was crying, and I'm like, Dacia, you wrote this. It was interesting because when you're finished and you're holding it in your hands, there's nothing like actually holding that final product in your hands. You're looking at this, and I did this. It's an incredible feeling.
It is.
It is really an incredible feeling. And I hope all of the students get to have that experience one of these days. When you get that first box of copies of books from your publisher and you open it up and they're there and they're staring at you. Pick me up. Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. I love that. I love the whole craft of it. But for me, I do it a little differently. I'm very much, I do the bones as far as I build my characters out, and I have an idea of plot and where I want the story to go, but I don't structure every chapter out. I just start writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just tends to fall into place. And my characters talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
We have conversations, and they let me know where we're going, and it's interesting. I like writing like that. It's kind of loosey goosey.
Mm-hmm.
Thus far, it has worked for me.
And it really depends what genre you're writing too. If you're writing more literary fiction or something with a more straightforward story arc, that's totally fine. But you see, when people are trying to write something like a mystery or thriller, yes, or something with plot twists,
yes,
if you don't have an idea what that's going to be when you start, you get a lot of contrivance, you get a lot of deus ex machina, and you get a lot of plot holes.
Right.
And those are things that if you get to the end of your story and you have those, you can't always fix that without tearing the whole thing down. So whatever you like to do, whatever works for you, that's great. And then whatever, helps serve whatever type of story you're trying to tell.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting observation. I appreciate that you said that, with the literary fiction being different from doing the crime novel or the mystery. Absolutely. I can see where there would need to be a whole lot more structure. That's not been my genre. So that's not something that I have experience with. So thank you for saying that. Outline is important. It does serve its purpose. Absolutely. And we do have quite a few students in here who are trying their hand at fantasy. And they're, creating these fantasy worlds. And I know those are huge undertakings.
That's very challenging, especially for a new writer.
That's been my concern.
Whereas with science fiction, which is kind of the sibling of fantasy, to an extent in science fiction, you can, when you're doing world building, you can say, this is what's different, and the reader will more or less assume that everything else is the same as reality. Mm-hmm. Whereas in fantasy fiction, you have to world build everything, and if you don't, people will kind of assume that you're defaulting to the sort of Tolkien-esque medieval elves, dwarves, dragons. Mm-hmm. And you can still tell stories in that genre. That genre is extremely tired. But the challenge is working your world building into your story without dumping exposition on your reader, especially up front,
Mhm.
right? If you know, most people don't like to read history books of real history. They don't want to read your made up history.
Right.
So I think the solution there is you have to, it helps to really get into your characters,
Mhm.
first of all, and
Mhm.
start with your characters and keep it character focused. A lot of writers seem to think, well, I'm doing genre fiction, so the characterization doesn't matter as much. But that's the slippery slope into just feeling profoundly generic. And have your character go out and interact with the world, and
Mhm.
then show the reader that way what's different about your fantasy world versus here's 3 paragraphs about how the magic system works.
Right.
Some people like that. We don't want it at the beginning of the book.
We don't want everything that we read or write to be the beginning of Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
We're long paragraphs of just description. We don't
The
want
other thing I would say about genre fiction, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy, is you don't have to tell a huge story. You don't have to tell a sprawling epic of kingdoms. You don't have to have people save the universe. It's 2022. We've had, 40 Marvel movies where they're saving the universe in every single movie. I don't need to save the universe. What you need is a goal and a problem that's meaningful to your character.
Right.
You don't make it more interesting by making the problem bigger. You make it more interesting by making it more meaningful to your protagonist.
Mhm.
So it can be even an inconsequential in the grand scheme of things goal that the protagonist has, but if it's deeply important to that person, then you will be interested.
Right. Right. The reader will be interested if it's believable, if they believe that this is something that the character truly wants and needs. They want them to get there.
Yeah.
Want them to have it. I had to tell you, I was grading a little while ago. This student had written something that really made me giggle because she had experienced a little bit of writer's block earlier in the week. And as she was thinking about her characters and kind of like talking to her characters about why aren't you giving me any information, she said, and she was writing this out, she said, my character said to me, we can't do anything else unless you give us James. And she's like, who's James? And then they told her about this other character that she needed to include.
Okay.
And I was like, that is absolutely brilliant. Your characters knew they needed James. Whoever James is, he needs to be in your story.
Yeah, it is important, I think, to make sure when you're sitting down figuring out where you want the story to go, to have your supporting cast that brings out what you want plot wise and character wise. It's important.
Yeah, you have to know your characters and have them ready to go. That is that first stage that we talked about at the beginning, that first stage where you are brainstorming, you have got to have those characters flushed out. Like I will create ideas about them that may never ever get included in the book, but at least I know something about their personalities.
Mhm.
And so if I need to toss that in, I can, but I really get these people up in my head.
And it goes both ways too. I'm working on a project now and I'm outlining it, and I had one character and I just found myself thinking, why are you here? You don't need to be here. And so I kind of mashed him up with somebody else and cut it down. And so you stay open-minded toward your story.
Absolutely.
Until you get to really building that house.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point, is to stay open-minded. Don't be so closed to an idea that you're so married to it that you can't adjust and change as the story writing commences. Because sometimes that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
It is. I had a student recently tell me, I think that she had written an entire chapter and then read it and scrapped the whole thing and started over. And I was like, hold on to it though. Don't throw it away. You don't know when you're going to need that, or it might actually work and you're just doubting yourself right now.
Yeah. And I hate that personally. And that's why I, line everything up so meticulously before I even start, because I hate doing that. It's the worst.
It is the worst. So outline, huh? Yeah.
It hurts way less to throw out a 10-page outline.
Right.
Than a 200-page story, I promise.
That makes a lot of sense. And it makes me go, maybe I should. But I am more, when I write, it is more literary fiction. I am more character centered. It is more just about like a character's internal growth.
Right. But I'm sure you still find it helpful to have an idea of where it's going and how it's getting there. And sometimes that's enough.
So
whatever works for you.
That idea, that arc, like I know where I want it to get to. But I had a situation, the one I mentioned, the grocery store situation was, that's my novel, A Kiss in the Rain. But I just had this idea, like, what if this old lady that comes to the grocery checker's lane, what if she and the checker become friends? Because I used to go through the same checker's lane. I have 6 children, by the way. And so I would go to the grocery store with all 6 of them in tow, and sometimes pulling 2 carts, one loaded with kids and the other, just pushing the groceries. And I would particularly go through a specific checker's lane every time. Her name was Joan, because Joan wouldn't make me feel crazy or bad or anything. She just made me feel very comfortable, and she was older. And so I never really had connected with any older people in my life until Joan. And I was young. I was like early 30s at this time. And the whole idea of what if Joan and I like really became friends became an idea, for me with a story, but I flipped it. And so the checker was the younger one, and it was the older lady that was coming through her lane. And the story just grew from there. And I know that everybody's like, well, that doesn't sound interesting. But it's about how their friendship then sees them both through some trauma that's coming. And it's sweet. It's nice. I like it.
And anything can be interesting if you have interesting characters doing meaningful things.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it is. But the idea, it was, like I said, it came to me in the grocery store.
Well, and I think isn't that how we get all our story ideas? Is we think, well, what if this happened? And then you just kind of pick at it until you see if a story can be unfolded out of it.
Absolutely. And hold on to those, because as people with imaginative minds, we're going to tend to see stories all over the place. And it's the ones that stay with you. And
that's true. The one I'm working on now, I've had kicking around in my head since 2004.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't ready. I didn't have the whole thing, and you can't force it all the time. You just have to, tug at it by thinking about it.
Right.
I write a little tiny bit every day. There's no day where I don't write, which keeps things fresh in my mind and lets me think about it more. But just all of a sudden, something will pop in your head and like, now I'm ready to outline this book. Now it's ready. It's going to be way better than it would have been if I had just like brute forced it through 10 years ago.
I want you to do something for me. Just jumping off of what you just said there too. Can you give the students permission to accept the fact that the brainstorming that you're doing in your head is also part of writing?
It absolutely is part of writing. I think I said earlier, when I'm doing that, I'm walking around the house or walking around the neighborhood, and that's writing. Even if I only come back to my desk and write down 2 sentences of notes, thinking about it is the first step in the writing process, obviously, so, and, maybe if you're thinking about it and you can't think of anything good, that's where writer's block happens. That's the only place for me writer's block happens, because once you know what's going to happen, then it's just a matter of, when you get stuck on the page, it's okay, well, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? That you can do, but creating the ideas, out of nothing, that's, I don't know how that fully works, but
it does.
It's writing,
Right. It is writing. So speaking of writer's block, how do you push yourself through that?
On the front end, I think writer's block, for me at least in a general sense, is when I'm not sure what I want to do. It's not necessarily what should I write. I'm not necessarily sorry, I just completely blanked out there. Let me try again.
Do you have a little writer's block?
No, my train of thought is easily derailed.
Does that mean you're bored?
No, it doesn't mean
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
My daughter just walked in.
Okay.
It's fine. So writer's block. So I'm in the process of outlining the sequel to Projections, which is the one you showed everybody at the beginning. And I have a basic 3-act structure, and I'm feeling kind of blocked about why can I not outline this yet? And so I think, why am I stuck?
Mhm.
Why am I stuck? What am I stuck on? I know what I want to do with the character.
Right.
I maybe don't know how I'm going to transition between these scenes and acts. I have to like hammer that out. That's word. Maybe there's not enough in this story. A lot of times I'll look at my ideas and be like, this needs more.
Mhm.
More needs to be happening. When I write a book, it should not be as exciting as an episode of a CBS 1-hour drama. It should be as exciting as a movie.
Right.
Right. So if I'm getting like, oh, this is syndicated TV vibes, that's not good enough. We need more needs to be happening here.
Right.
That happens a lot to me. Because make it more exciting.
Mhm.
Blow up more things. You can always, well, depending on your genre, if you need something, if you get bored, you can always blow something up.
Right. True. In your writing.
In your writing. Yes. In your
Right.
writing. So it's a lot of the time it's just developing a better sense of what I'm trying to achieve. And then it's also a degree of patience to be willing to let it sort of percolate.
Mhm.
And then you'll get a better sense. You get one more idea, and then eventually you'll have enough. That's the part I haven't figured out how to fast track, really,
Mhm.
which is frustrating, but a little bit of progress every day. That's kind of the
right.
goal. Even if
doesn't-
it's
It
even
doesn't
if it's
have to
one
be-
paragraph.
We do not have to be perfect right at the gate. It's not going to happen. Every day we do a little bit more and a little more, and we grow, and we just do this thing because we need to. We absolutely need to. It's part of who we are.
The other way I get around it is I burn out very quickly working on something. If I'm writing on a novel for 20 minutes, sometimes I get in a zone and I can just write for an hour. Other times I'm sick of it after 20 minutes. And that's okay. So I said, fine, I do 20 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Even if you do 15 minutes a day, it stays fresh in your head and you can make good progress on it.
Mhm.
But I like to always be working on 2 books at once. And I'm not necessarily recommending this to new writers, but it's something I like because I can be burned out on one project and jump right to the next one and it's fresh again.
Wow.
And okay, where are we going with it? Especially if I'm at different stages of that outline to writing process.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And that's with years of experience in here, guys.
Yeah. So to the point that it's almost like I can write a book in 1 year and I can write 2 books in 1 year if they're not in the same series.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 2 completely different
Yeah.
styles. I was doing that a few years ago, and I didn't successfully complete one of them, and it's still sitting. It's a nonfiction venture, and I just did not. And I was flipping back and forth between the 2, but for me, it just didn't. I wasn't able to give the attention to the one, so I threw myself fully into the other.
And that's fine, and again, one way is not the right way for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And some people can sit there and write for 2 hours straight and it's nothing to them. And those people don't need to work on multiple projects, but I can't do that. I get, I'm clicking over to the internet, after 20 minutes, and you catch yourself doing that. You're like, okay, it's time to shift to something else that's also productive.
Right. That's funny. Now I will zone out and it will 3 or 4 hours will go past and I have no clue. No clue that I've been sitting at the computer for that long and writing for that long. It just,
I wish I could do that.
I think it's an escape mechanism too sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm the same way when I'm reading. Like I can read an entire novel in a 5-hour sitting because I get so immersed into what I'm doing. And the same thing happens to me when I'm writing because I get so into the story.
That's good. At a certain point, my energy level and the difficulty level hit, and then my brain thinks you could be playing video games right now instead of doing this. So I don't have productivity quotas that I set for myself, but I do have time quotas that I set for myself every day to write. And I do advise anybody who takes writing seriously to write every day, even if it is only 15 minutes a day.
Right.
It's so much better than, oh, I haven't written in a week and a half and now I'm gonna sit down and bang out, for 2 hours. It's just like, if you do one chore every day in your house, it's better than trying to spend the entire Saturday cleaning your house. It's exactly the same.
Right. Right. Well, we talked in class a little bit about you have to establish a pattern and basically a habit, develop a habit so that your mind recognizes when you sit down at the computer and you've got, for me, it would be my big drink and, I'll have the distractions shut out, that it's time to write, it's time to do this. And so you begin to train your brain. If you begin to make this a habitual thing that you're doing for yourself, it'd be easier to kick into gear.
It's so much easier.
And I think that's one of the things that the students are struggling with. Some of the students are struggling with is developing that type of habit and like looking into their own schedule and figuring out when to begin putting that in and how to get started.
It's great if you can block off a certain time of the day every day that like, oh, this is writing time. That's great to do. And I also find one of the benefits I've noticed since I've gone to writing every day is I think about it a lot more. Right? If I'm standing in the shower, I'm thinking about my stories rather than sports or movies, whatever. And I like that better because again, writing happens when you're having ideas, and
Right. I love that.
it makes it easier once you finally sit down, then you're ready to go.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. You guys have permission to include your thinking time as part of writing. Now that doesn't count towards your 5,000 word goal for every week for the next 4 weeks.
You do also need butt in the chair time. Absolutely.
I figured a 5,000 a week goal. That's not terrible. Right.
I would love to write 5,000 words a week. That would be amazing.
Well, I'm a big fan of NanoWrimo. And I've completed it successfully 5 times. But I love that under the gun, under pressure, just go, like let your fingers fly. But I also type 90 words a minute. So like it's, it's a thing for me. It really works for me. But the first semester that I was teaching this, I signed us all up for NanoWrimo. I set the goal for everyone. It didn't go so great.
Yeah, some of us who are more meticulous outliners are less enthusiastic about NanoWrimo.
Yes, I can understand why you would be.
But I think the main takeaway for everybody from NanoWrimo is not what you produce as much as it is if you can use that to get yourself into a habit of writing a little bit every day.
Yes.
And that is the main thing that is going to benefit you in the long run if you are taking writing seriously.
It almost forces you. If you're serious about reaching that word goal, it forces you to establish some kind of routine, which is super nice. And I was communicating with a student earlier today about NanoWrimo, and I said, I think that for me, one of the greatest benefits of it was I became bolder in my writing because I didn't have time, because that word count was so important to me. I'm an overachiever in some ways. And so that word count was set and I'm like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to do that. And in order to do that, I had to stop thinking about what I was writing so much. And I had to stop worrying, what will people think if I write this, you know? And so I got bolder and was actually like cussing and writing scenes that would shock my mother, and just went for it. And beautiful things started happening for me because I stopped stopping myself, which was a really lovely thing. And I would say that that was probably my biggest takeaway from NanoWrimo, and one of the reasons why I think everyone should love it, but I understand it's not for everyone.
But everybody can learn something from it, I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I set a 20,000 word goal for this writing project that we're currently doing right now with the class. And I feel like that's doable. If we're serious about writing, I feel like that's doable. But you're right, we have to establish that habitual time where we're doing writing every day so that it's fresh and it's just part of who we are. It's what we do.
Yeah.
So that's very important. So do you have anything else that you would like to make sure that the students hear from you?
I think I've covered just about everything I had on my little list. Did you have any other questions for me?
I'm good. I'm looking at the time.
Oh, I wasn't even.
Not that I'm a clock watcher. I'm not necessarily a clock watcher, but I used to be. But my husband, he is not a clock watcher. And so I have learned to stop looking at clocks, which has been really nice. It's a nice way to live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I used to always be like, gotta go. It's time. But not so much anymore, but I did notice the time. And so we might want to draw this to a close, but I appreciate you very much taking the time out of your day to talk with me and to share some of your insights and some advice and just some what works for you and all of these things. I think it's very important for the students to hear. And I'm super excited to be getting to put together this author series for the class, and it's on YouTube as well. So it'll be there as well. I know Rex asked if he could post it on his website. And I said, of course you can. That was really sweet. But I very much thank you. Thank you very much for this.
You're welcome. It was fun.
I very much appreciate it. And I am excited to be learning more about Tulsa Nightwriters group myself. So.
Well, I'll say one more thing about Tulsa Nightwriters.
Okay.
I think so. We have writing groups like Tulsa Nightwriters, which are not the same as, say, a critique group, which is a smaller group of people who read each other's writing and give feedback. And I think both are incredibly valuable. Mm-hmm. Critique group, obviously, you learn what's working and not working with your story. But a writing group like Tulsa Nightwriters, especially if you're new, even if you're not new, you can come to the meetings and you'll learn a lot about all kinds of things: writing, publishing, contests, all sorts of things that you may not have any idea about. But for me, at this point in my writing stage, one of the greatest things about Tulsa Nightwriters and writing groups is being around other people who are excited about writing makes you excited about writing. Writing can be a very draining activity, and it just can suck the life out of you. But you go to a meeting and you talk to all the people, even if you don't talk about writing. Hi, how are you? These people are all there because they love writing too, and it's invigorating.
Yes, it is.
Come home excited about writing.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw the video there on YouTube with my friend Shannon Yarbrough. He's an author in St. Louis, but that's where we met. We met in a writing group in St. Louis, and I just love him. And it's because we connected about writing, and we were able to just connect in a way that I don't connect with many other people, because we have that commonality that most other people don't share. that love of writing, that desire to create with words, and that just that love of language. And so it's an amazing, wonderful thing to have the gift of others to communicate with.
Yes.
You get encouragement in a way that you just aren't going to find anywhere else. So I have been encouraging the students, to make connections with each other, get connected in writing groups. If this is something that you are serious about doing, you are serious about writing, you cannot go at it alone. Don't go at it alone.
It's just a lot harder and slower. And, other people have been there, and there's a lot of experiences to be learned from that can save you a lot of time and pain.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And you hear other people say, don't sit back and think you know all the answers, because you don't. And it's okay not to. So learn from other people.
Well, you get to a point and you're like, well, I don't actually know any of the answers.
Mhm.
And that's okay. That's wisdom, I think. But
yeah.
We're all just trying to figure it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no perfect formula. You just find what works for you. Okay. Well, thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and draw this to a close, and I certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was fun.
It was fun. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.